Alright, what's up everyone, I'm Faloki, and today we're going to be taking a look at the recent firing of offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer. Now this sudden firing of Brian Schottenheimer honestly caught me by surprise because there was a lot of things coming out about Pete Carroll saying that Brian Schottenheimer was going to be the guy for a while. They were going to do something over the offseason, they were going to come out next season, try to revamp the offense and do better. But apparently they had some differences in how they thought they could revamp the offense, and that led to his firing. Brian Schottenheimer was reportedly fired due to philosophical differences between him and Pete Carroll, which honestly doesn't look that good because Pete Carroll, he did say he wanted to run the ball more and run the ball better. And I'd assume that Brian Schottenheimer would want to do something like he did in the first half of the season where we had Russell Wilson passing the ball, taking shots, taking risks, and actually making big plays. And I assume that's kind of where the differences happened because in that second half of the season for the Seahawks, we started running the ball more, we started to take less shots, we didn't let Russell Wilson make as many risks because, you know, he had some really bad high turnover games midway through the season, and I think that just made Pete Carroll lose faith in him, made Russell Wilson lose faith in himself, and they kind of just went back to running the ball a little bit more than they should. And I think that's where the philosophical differences come in between these two. And honestly, if that is exactly what went wrong and Brian Schottenheimer ended up getting fired because Pete Carroll wants to run the ball more and Brian Schottenheimer wanted to go try to revamp the passing game, then that's not good for the Seahawks in the future because, I mean, we have a great quarterback in Russell Wilson. Why would we not want to continue to pass the ball? And it seems like Pete Carroll, from what I have seen, really wants to go back to that 2017, 2018, 2019 where we just run the ball way too much. Now, in my opinion, Brian Schottenheimer was by no means an amazing offensive coordinator. I think he was good. He had a good relationship with Russell Wilson. He called some good plays early on. The first half of the season, the offense was just clicking on all cylinders. The passing game was working. The run game was pretty inconsistent, but the passing game worked. We put up points. That's really all that mattered. Our defense was just very subpar. And of course, the second half of the season was completely and utterly disappointing for the Seahawks, but I think the biggest problem was the lack of adjustments, and that's something that happens. Brian Schottenheimer, I think he could have adjusted better on offense, you know, added some plays here, thrown in some random trick plays there, just started messing with things, get defenses on their toes. But he just really didn't, and I think that was his main problem. And I mean, that's a problem that he can definitely fix going into next season where, you know, we pass the ball, we do really good in the first half, or we were letting Russell Wilson take shots, letting him pass the ball, make those big plays, and once defenses start to figure it out, we start running some like boot options, you know, some play actions, but not just play actions, stand in the pocket and then run away once your offensive line immediately collapses the pocket. You know, I think there were adjustments that could have been made, but I don't think that was enough for him to be fired. The thing that worries me the most about this firing is the fact that this is probably going to lead us to going back to running the ball way too much and not really putting the ball into Russell Wilson's hands, and that's something that really disappoints me because I had heard a lot of things about Brian Schottenheimer supposedly wanting to, you know, go more pass heavy in 2021. It sounded like he wanted to let Russell Wilson do what he was doing in the first half of the season where they put the ball in his hands a lot more and let him do the work. And then he probably would have been more likely to make some adjustments once defenses started to figure that out. And then we would have probably had a really nice offense. But it seems like Pete Carroll really wanted to go right down into the run game. And that's something that I don't really like. I don't want us to run the ball super heavily. You know, even if we do bring back Carson, I think he's an insanely talented halfback. I think he is a great guy. I think he would be a great person for the Seahawks team, especially with how hard he runs. But I don't think that Carson is a guy that we should be running 20, 25, 30 times a game when we have Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Freddie Swain. We have some amazing tight ends too. Like, we can do so much in the passing game, but if Brian Schottenheimer being fired really just means that we're going straight in back to running the ball way too much and only really throwing Russell Wilson out there to make big plays in the fourth quarter when we desperately need him because our run game didn't work well enough and our defense isn't able to stop people like they used to be back in the Legion of Boom days, this is not a good thing. Now, there's really not much of a point dwelling on this. Brian Schottenheimer's already gone. Whatever he might have done in 2021 to try to help the passing game, we'll never get to see it. We won't know what he was going to do. We won't know if it would have worked. But going into this offseason without an offensive coordinator, and we're probably going to hire one relatively soon, it doesn't really look too good because one of the top guys for the Seahawks right now is the offensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Chargers. And, you know, I don't hate the Los Angeles Chargers. I really like Justin Herbert, and I think he did great this year. That would be amazing if we could get Russell Wilson doing what Justin Herbert did. But the problem with that is the fact that this Chargers offensive coordinator is a run-oriented guy. He doesn't really care about passing the ball. It seems like Pete Carroll wants him because he came in there to run the ball. That's supposedly what Anthony Lynn wanted him there for last year with the LA Chargers, and Anthony Lynn's been fired. He didn't do great last year, and the Chargers really didn't do great in the run game. So if this is a guy that we end up picking up for our offensive coordinator, I don't think that he's a better option than Brian Schottenheimer. But there is another guy from the Chargers who has been seemingly getting some interest from the Seahawks, or people are talking about him going to the Seahawks, and honestly, I think this would be way better than getting the offensive coordinator. And this man is Pep Hamilton, the former head coach of the DC Defenders in the XFL. He was also the quarterback coach for the LA Chargers this year when Justin Herbert had an amazing year. He also worked with Andrew Luck, so he has his experiences with great quarterbacks that can be dynamic and showed to play dynamic when they were actually under him. Justin Herbert last year, he had a great season. He played really well. He got out of the pocket sometimes, and he even had a horrible offensive line, and he was making plays. They were doing absolutely amazing on offense. The passing game for the Chargers, surprisingly enough, is actually one of the better ones in the NFL. Their defense really just wasn't that good, and they made quite a bit of mistakes, and they lost a lot of close games. I personally think that Pep Hamilton seems like a lot better of an option for the Seahawks offensive coordinator job than the offensive coordinator of the LA Chargers, because the Chargers, they were great on offense, but that was mainly because of Justin Herbert and the passing game. Their run game was not spectacular. They did some pretty good things with their running backs in the passing game, but still, I do not think that their offensive coordinator was the main guy when it came to how good their team was doing. Justin Herbert was definitely carrying that team on offense, and a lot of that came down to Pep Hamilton. Now, there have been some other possibilities that have been thrown around, including the Seahawks' current passing game coordinator, the 49ers' current run game coordinator. There's also been some possibilities and some speculation about Doug Peterson, which I don't think is ever going to happen. Honestly, I do not want Doug Peterson as an offensive coordinator, as a head coach, or anything involved with the Seahawks, nor do I think he would come in as an offensive coordinator, because I think he wants to be a head coach. I think he has a lot of pride in himself. He literally won a Super Bowl as a head coach like 3-4 years ago. I don't think he's going to allow himself to go down a tier and go to offensive coordinator, but we'll see what happens. I don't think the Seahawks are going to sign him. I don't think there's any chance of that, but maybe a team signs him to be their head coach or offensive coordinator. I don't know what Doug Peterson's going to do. There's also been some possibilities thrown out about Adam Gase and Anthony Lynn. I do not want those two whatsoever. Doug Peterson, Adam Gase, Anthony Lynn, I don't want any of those guys anywhere near the Seahawks organization. Just keep them away. The Jets were atrocious last year. Doug Peterson made a lot of bad, stupid decisions. And Anthony Lynn, as someone who has a friend who is a Chargers fan, I have heard nothing but bad things about that guy. He can't put the right number of people on the field for punts, so what do you think he's going to do as a head coach or an offensive coordinator for a team? I do not want Anthony Lynn. I don't want Adam Gase. I don't want Doug Peterson, nor do I think any of those three would actually go down a tier and be anything but a head coach. But overall, I think this Brian Schottenheimer firing was a bit questionable. I don't really think that we should have fired him, especially seeing as though how good we were in the first half of the season and how he wanted to go back to letting Russ cook, but he wanted to be able to add some differentiation into there. But I mean, he's gone. He got fired. Really disappointing, especially if Pete Carroll is kind of doing the Doug Peterson thing where he wants to take over. He wants to do what he wants to do, and if anyone disagrees with him, they get out of the organization. I really hope that Pete Carroll doesn't turn into that Doug Peterson type of guy, because Doug Peterson was fired mainly because he wanted to do his thing, and anyone that had differentiating opinions, they just got fired. And I really hope that Pete Carroll's not going to become that, but with the Brian Schottenheimer firing, it does not look good for the Seahawks offense. I would love to get Pep Hamilton. Honestly, out of everyone that I've seen, I think Pep Hamilton's probably going to be the best option for us. Justin Herbert had a great rookie season with a very subpar offensive line, so the Seahawks, they're not going to be able to get a great offensive line in one offseason, so we're still going to be dealing with offensive line issues. And I think that if a guy like that can work with a rookie with a horrible offensive line and get him to do as good as he did, imagine what he could do with Russell Wilson. That's just something that really makes me kind of excited if we do sign him, but I don't think we will. I think Pete Carroll seems like he's going to be going for someone that's going to be run oriented. It seems like Pete Carroll really wants to go back to running the ball way too much, and honestly, I don't think that's going to work too well. We don't have the defense like we did back in the Legion of Boom when that worked. We don't have the running game like we did with the great offensive line that we had for running the ball and Marshawn Lynch. Chris Carson is a great running back, but he's not anywhere near Marshawn Lynch. Marshawn Lynch was just a completely different animal, and I don't think that we need to go back to that. We have Russell Wilson. The Seahawks offense can run through Russell Wilson. The NFL is a much more pass-heavy league, a much more scoring-oriented league. Any team that can put up more points than the other team is going to win. It's not about playing defense anymore because the rules are so heavily favored toward the offensive side of the football. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me why Pete Carroll wants to go back to this old school running the ball way too much and just hoping that we can play good defense, because our defense has not been super consistent, especially when our offense has been running the ball and running inefficiently. Our defense completely suffers, but when we can actually put together drives when Russell Wilson is carrying us, doing what he needs to do, it seems like we do a lot better when we pass the ball. And with this Brian Schottenheimer firing, I think that passing the ball might just go out the window, and that's something that scares me, especially with so much talent in the passing game. I really do not want to see us have a run-oriented offense again. I think that first half of the season was amazing. Imagine if our defense would have played like they did in the second half of the season, in the first half of the season. We would have been absolutely dominant. I think that's something that we can do in 2021 if we can just figure out a different scheme to make us pass heavy, but also more differentiated and more unpredictable. I just think that there are so much easier things that we can do except for going back to what didn't work in running the football. I think that we should sign Pep Hamilton. We can't get Brian Schottenheimer back, but from what I've heard, Brian Schottenheimer wanted to go back to passing the ball a lot, wanted to run a pass-heavy scheme and make some changes, and that would have been great, but he got fired, and that's really disappointing. Hopefully we can bring in Pep Hamilton. That's the best guy that I have seen so far out of the possibilities and the speculations. And I mean, if Justin Herbert can do well behind that guy, I think Russell Wilson can do amazing behind him. So really, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. There's a lot of people that the Seahawks could go for. I really hope we go for someone who's pass-oriented, but it doesn't seem like that's going to be likely, seeing as though Pete Carroll wants to run the ball more. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. I really enjoy when we're much more of a passing team because I know Russell Wilson's great. We have great wide receivers, great tight ends. Our offensive line's trash, but we can do something to work around that. But that's going to do it for this video. Let me know down below in the comments what you think about this. What do you think about the Brian Schottenheimer firing? Do you think it was justified? Do you think it was a bad move? Who do you think we should pick up to actually be our next offensive coordinator? Let me know down below in the comments. Like I said, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you're new, and with that, I'd like to thank you for watching. Have a great day.